Good evening from the News Radio 1120 and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I'm Bill Lundun, and I grew up in a middle-class family. Actually, if you watched the Brett Baer thing last night, she's now got a new slogan, if you will, a new positioning statement. Now it's, we will follow the law. Anyway, tonight's news and Oregon Stupid News brought to you by Dr. Michael Bratland of Denell. And I just wanted to say, so Dr. Bratland happens to be now my dentist. And I had a crown that needed to be replaced. And I got to say, number one, you can tell that Dr. Bratland actually cares about Denell by the people that he hires. I have to say, from the person that's sitting at the front desk to the person that's in the back room working on your teeth, whether it's replacing a crown, whether it has to do with cleaning your teeth, the hygienist, everybody he has in there, the entire staff are so competent and just so good at what they do. It's really impressive. He runs a great practice. So I just wanted to throw that out there simply because it's top of mind. And yes, I got my new crown, which, by the way, was made in Idaho. And I couldn't be happier. All right. So as far as the news, let's talk about dentists. Do you know that Oregon dentists actually do not like dealing with the Oregon Health Plan? Why would that be? Now, the Oregon Health Plan is Oregon's sort of brand of Medicare, or actually Medicaid. And depending on the region, anywhere between 55 to 70% of dentists refuse Medicaid patients, and in particular, those on the Oregon Health Plan. Well, why would that be? So, the Oregon Health Authority just spent $1.6 million to figure out why. The results? A big part of it is dentists say the process to file Medicaid insurance claims is tedious. The coverage is insufficient for many common dental procedures like wisdom teeth removals, crowns, dentures, and the state doesn't communicate what's actually covered for dental procedures and what isn't. And often providers said they're not aware of any of the changes in the covered services until they file a Medicaid claim and the claim is denied and they have to eat it. Now, here's the way that I love Oregon and its bureaucracy. You would think, okay, well, this is problematic. According to the OHA, moving forward, they've issued a series of recommendations from potentially increasing Medicaid reimbursement rates to implementing, I'll quote it, implementing a communication and outreach plan to reduce misconceptions about OHP. Okay, you either pay or you don't. If you're constantly changing the goalposts as to what you'll cover and what you want, it's not a misconception. If dentists can't actually afford to accept Oregon Health Plan patients, then that's not a misconception. That's a problem with the Oregon Health Plan's business model. It's not a misconception. And this is the case in Oregon. When Oregon screws up, instead of actually addressing the problem, making actual changes, what do? They go on a spin tour to try and convince people that their screw-ups are actually the right way to do it. Welcome to Oregon. Was that editorializing? Yeah, I guess it was. And I don't care. All right. We have covered this, of course, multiple times, and it has to do with the Oregon Department of Transportation's Oregon Driver and Motor Vehicle Services Motor Voter System, whereby the Oregon Department of Transportation's DMV registered, at least at last count, 1,561 non-citizens to vote. And now DMV has published a 7-page self-evaluation addressing why that even happened. And it's kind of fun. The review says the agency, which is led by Amy Joyce, did not make sure staff understood how to safeguard the voter rolls as it allowed more people to receive driver's licenses. The report says, quote, DMV leadership failed to recognize and convey the need for a high level of rigor in this element of a transaction. It went on to say, this includes failing to prioritize accuracy over efficiency in system configuration and failing to ensure staff were receiving training initially and over time about the importance of accuracy in this work. It also includes failing to proactively initiate reviews of processes and outcomes regarding DMV's role in the motor voter system, particularly after the system change and types of documents accepted in 2021. That's a lot. But the biggest problem, they say, goes back to 21 when the Oregon Motor Voter Law and the Driver's Licenses for All Act allowed the agency to begin providing driver's licenses to people living in Oregon without any legal documentation. Now, of course, leadership at the DMV has pointed down to the frontline folks and saying, well, the people at DMV were making mistakes because of a drop-down bar and so on. This is a nice way for the folks on the front lines to point up at Oregon's overpaid bureaucrats and say, no, you actually jacked this up from the very beginning and you jacked it up from the top. And they also kind of passive-aggressively lobbed a hand grenade into the Legislative Assembly because, well, it was the legislature in Oregon, led by Democrats, that decided everybody in Oregon, even if they're not legally in this country, should have an Oregon driver's license. Still no word, though, on why it took 6 weeks for DMV to alert the Secretary of State and the governor after the issue was actually discovered. Now, regarding that, Oregon's Secretary of State issued an open letter addressing the errors that led to more than 1,500 people being registered to vote when they shouldn't have been. And Lavon Griffin-Vlad continues to say there will be no impact in the November election. It reiterated that the citizenship status of those erroneous registrations is unknown and notes that those people intentionally, or that none of those people they claim, how they know that, I don't know, since they don't know whether they're actual citizens or not. She says that nobody intentionally attempted to illegally register. Griffin-Vlad also acknowledged the situation had created confusion and fear among Oregon's immigrant community, whom she claims have been targeted by false information and attacks. Okay, why is it you're not talking about how it is that you're going to make sure that the integrity of the Oregon vote is going to be protected? Since this has been going on since at least 2021, what about the other voter rolls? What about the rolls and how many people are on the rolls that have maybe moved out of the state, that have moved into a different county, that have changed their name because of marriage or because they want to be known as Mr. Ooh La La as opposed to Mr. Smith? And what about the people that have died? And while they're going through trying to find the motor voter rolls, and whether people were actually registered that should have been registered, what about going through the entirety of the rolls and just cleaning them up? You're already doing this. Why not do the job fully and show Oregonians that you're actually concerned about voter integrity instead of trying to stand out there and say, now, making it sort of passive-aggressively a matter of equity? So newly uncovered data shows Oregonians benefited from less than 1% of drug rebates that pharmacy benefits managers collected in 2023. Now, if you don't know about PBMs, essentially they're the intermediaries between medication manufacturers and consumers and insurance companies And typically, they also, well, either work for an insurance company or the pharmacy, or in some cases, both. Anyway, they're the ones that determine which drugs are covered by health insurance, where prescriptions can be filled, and all of those other annoying things. And these third-party entities are now required to self-report the aggregated amount of rebates, fees, price protection payments, and other payments manufacturers send. The Oregon Department of Financial Regulation said that 18 PBMs received $288 million in rebates and payments from manufacturers last year. And of that, $2,236,000 was actually passed on to consumers like they were supposed to be. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Oregon crime and punishment. You may not be aware of this, but we're talking about a crime that goes back to essentially 2017, May 14th. Now, that would be 7 years ago. And a Clackamas County man at that time decapitated his mother, drove with her severed head to the grocery store, carried her head into the grocery store, a thriftway, and stabbed one of the clerks at the grocery store. Now, he was sent to the Oregon State Hospital. And now, well, he's going to get new digs. So he is going to be transferred to what they call a community-based treatment center, and that he's receiving a conditional release. This happened 7 years ago. Now, this residential center is going to be in Umatilla, which is over in northern central Oregon, and he is going to be sent there. Now, when he committed these crimes, his name, why can't I find it? He killed his mom, Tina Webb. He's from Clackamas County. And Webb, Joshua Webb, was living with his mother at the time that he murdered her. And at the time when he was arrested, psychologists evaluated him and concluded that he was having a psychiatric disorder related to schizophrenia. Okay. So he was sentenced to 30 years at the Oregon State Hospital and was found guilty, except for insanity, in the killing. So he was supposed to spend 30 years there. Well, enter the Oregon Psychiatric Security Review Board, who, by the way, are impaneled by the governor to 4-year terms. There's 5 of them. And even though the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office objected that the state's own Oregon Department of Justice was against it, well, you know, the Oregon Psychiatric Security Review Board decided, no, we need to give him a conditional release and let him go in a residential, a neighborhood treatment center. Now, here's a few of the arguments that were made against releasing him. The lawyers argued that Webb failed to demonstrate, and still has, any remorse or empathy, that the shockingly violent nature of his crime should be enough to say, yeah, he shouldn't be released. And he was found at the Oregon State Hospital to be repeatedly viewing YouTube serial killer programming. And they say that should make him ineligible for release. He was caught a number of times viewing videos dealing with both Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy. And when he was caught, what he said was, "Oh, I feel sad for Dahmer and Gacy's victims." The Oregon Department of Justice attorney, Elizabeth Weiner, said during the hearing that the record shows and has shown repeatedly that Webb is a pathological liar. Weiner also told the panel that Webb was aware that his concerning lack of remorse and empathy would be considered a barrier for his discharge. And she said, anytime you're consuming serial killer content, it's voyeurism at best and it's pathological at worst. particularly after you've decapitated your own mom and toted her head around. Scott Healy, who is with the Clackamas County DA's office, told the board that a conditional release represented too great a risk given Webb's extreme crime. The board also heard a report included among Webb's records that documented how in 11th grade he had drawn a picture or had drawn a number of pictures with people with their heads cut off. So the Oregon Psychiatric Security Review Board decided, oh yeah, he doesn't need to be at the secure Oregon State Hospital. Let's send him to a residential treatment center. Now, I bring this up because of another crime, and this was just concluded this week. A man who beat another person to death on a Lane Transit District bus in November of 2022 has been sentenced to life in custody at the Oregon State Hospital. We're talking about 32-year-old Derek Denell. He was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in November of 2022 after he brutally beat 69-year-old Travis Sanders to death while he was riding a Lane Transit District bus. And Travis Sanders actually was on the bus because he was going to church. Court records show that Denell was found by doctors from the Oregon State Hospital, do you see where this is going? To be schizophrenic, and his mental fitness to stand trial was in question while he awaited. So he was found unfit to proceed in February of 2023 and then finally found fit to proceed in June of 2023. Court records show that Denell submitted a petition to be found guilty except for insanity on October 15th, that was Tuesday of this week, and was committed to the custody of the Oregon State Hospital and the Oregon Psychiatric Security Review Board for the remainder of his life. That's what they say. Court records, though, admit and show that the family of Travis Sanders is to be notified of any Psychiatric Security Review Board hearings related to Denell, including if he's released or escapes from custody. So he's given a life sentence, but the Psychiatric Security Review Board at any time can say, bye, see you later, have fun, nice to know you. Oh yeah, you were schizophrenic, but you're not anymore. You are free to go. They say a life sentence, and that sounds really good to the public. But when you get into the weeds, you find out that they're already admitting and already setting up for a time that the Oregon Psychiatric Security Review Board is going to release this guy. Just like the man who decapitated his mom. Now, in this case, he beat this poor man to death on a bus. In the other, a man decapitated his mom, carried her head around, and was only sentenced to 30 years. But of course, given a conditional release early, after only 7 years. This is justice in Oregon. All right, Dr. Michael Bratland brings you this look at the news. Rick now rolls out the reel. Have a great day.